That's fine. Yeah,
All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Laurence Brown. Dr. Laurence Brown is a retired Air Force officer, medical director, and chief ophthalmologist of a major eye center in the Middle East. He's also the author of 4 books of comparative religion. So it's a pleasure and a privilege that you joined us today. Thank you so much, Dr. Brown, for being here.
well, thanks for having me.
Definitely.
You mentioned the 4 books of comparative religion, but I also authored 3 novels, which are just kind of fun reads for Muslims.
Is it for Muslims specifically, or are the 3 novels for anyone?
No, it's not. Actually, what happened was that I wrote my books of comparative religion, and then I decided to take a different approach. So I wrote some books, some novels, which were action adventure novels. And that was a way of approaching the Islamic Dawah with, through entertainment, basically. And well, I don't have them right at hand, but the 2 books of comparative religion are these 2, Misguided and Guided.
Yeah.
And then there's also the First and Final Commandment and Bearing True Witness. And then the novels are The Eighth Scroll and The Zion Deception and The Returned.
Mm-hmm. You wrote those books quite a while back, right? If I'm not mistaken, the 4 books in 2008, was it, or something along those lines?
Yeah, it was around then. I kind of got burnt out on writing. And also I felt that I had accomplished what I set out to accomplish, mm-hmm. and was satisfied with what I had written. And I also was developing a little bit of carpal tunnel
yeah.
from so much typing. And so, yeah.
Sounds good. Well, I recently just wrote a 16-page short book on contingency argument, and basically going through the whole, argumentation for a necessary being from different books. It's a very small booklet that I published, and it took me like a couple of months. So, and especially English is not my native language, so it's also harder for me. But yeah, I was wondering, so just for people maybe who don't know you, you became a Muslim like when exactly, or how long have you been Muslim throughout your life?
Well, 27 years ago.
Okay.
So I was, I'm 62 now. So I was atheist until the age of around 35. And I basically was on a spiritual search for about the last 3 or 4 years of my atheism. Mm-hmm. And that ended with me. I mean, I was trying very hard to become Christian because I thought, being in America, I thought that's got to be the way to go, but I could never convince myself. And in the end, I found that things, nothing really tied everything together until I learned about Islam, and that's when I became Muslim.
Mm-hmm. That's great, because I remember I became a Muslim this year, actually. So it's my first year. It's been 11 months. So I'm 30. So I lived 29 years as an kind of atheist Christian, but let's say more atheist towards the end. So it's like a completely different lifestyle. And I don't know if you can still recall, how was it living as an atheist? If you can still remember those flashbacks, because I mean, of course I remember, because it wasn't that, long time ago, but do you still remember how you used to think, or what were you thinking about the world? Because for me, it was very dark, very depressed. I remember not feeling happy or not enjoying my life really, and still trying to figure out, like, even if I had a business or something, it wasn't still like, there was still something missing. So do you still remember that part of your life, or is it like gone?
I do. And I remember that it was a kind of a lonely existence. Mm-hmm. When you don't have God in your life, you don't have anyone to thank. I'm not sure if any one is, yeah, the right term, but yeah, you know, when you don't have our creator in your life, you don't have our creator to thank, you don't have our creator to turn to.
Mhm.
And it's kind of it is a bit of an empty and a sad existence. But you know, the funny thing about it, and I'm sure you will, well, I assume that you will agree with this, but the funny thing about it is that you don't really realize it until you become a believer. It's like the idea of how you don't, you know, you don't appreciate things until they're gone. Like, you know, you don't appreciate oxygen until you can't breathe. You don't appreciate your heart beating until it, you know, it misses a beat.
Mhm.
And so you don't appreciate how empty your life was until you find your creator. When you start to live this very rich life, very fulfilling life,
Yeah, I would compare it that.
finding your purpose in life, and knowing that you're not alone, and also knowing that there's something after, you know, that there's something to follow. It it's very enriching.
Yeah, I would compare it living like on a surface where there's not much depth in your life, and it's just kind of like very limited existence. And now that you know like how deep this, let's say, life gets, it gets really rewarding in some sense. You know, it's really a different sort of existence, I would say. So I feel, you know, I don't feel like pity for people who don't see this, and I want to invite them to Islam, but it's, you know, very difficult. But some people might argue and say like, hey, well, you're a doctor, so that can be your purpose. Or, you know, I have a business, so that can be my purpose. Like, what's wrong with that? So maybe for people, because I've met a ton of people who don't even start questioning, let's say, their purpose or meaning in life. So what made you even start with this? Because most people just live their life without you know, asking them these questions. So why, when did you become interested in finding out like, okay, this is like not making much sense, I want to find if there's anything deeper in this life? Like, what was that trigger for you?
Well, do you know anything about my story, about what led me to being on a spiritual search, or
I
is this the first time you're hearing it?
I think it's the first time I've seen some of the videos of you, but I think it was more on the argument side of things. It wasn't
Okay.
about your personal story. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, basically what happened was when my second daughter was born, she was born with what we thought at the time was a lethal cardiac defect.
Mhm.
So she had a coarctation of the aorta, which means that the main vessel coming off the heart was just closed down, and the blood was not getting to the lower part of her body. So her entire body, from like the chest down, was about this color here, you know, just a dusky blue, because she wasn't getting oxygen to her body. And and this was you know, 30 years ago, and at the time the you know, of course, she went straight from being born to the neonatal intensive care unit, and the doctor there thought that she was going to die, and everybody else did also. And you know, if you saw the picture of this baby, this gunmetal blue color, you know, you can understand the amount of panic that that brings. And I was in Washington, D.C., and they brought in a you know, what I call a sort of a super specialist. He was not only a cardiothoracic surgeon, but he was a consultant in pediatric cardiothoracic surgery. And while he was examining my daughter, they asked me to leave the room, which is standard practice. And up until that point in my life, I had always been atheist, and had never I had never felt out of control, you know. I'd always felt if I needed something, I knew where to get it. If I needed more money, I worked harder or I worked longer hours. I needed this, I did that, et cetera, et cetera. This was the first time in my life where I felt totally helpless. And so when they asked me to leave, I just went straight to the prayer room in the hospital. And I prayed what is sort of my version of the skeptic's prayer. Are you familiar with the skeptic's prayer?
I'm not sure specifically. I guess it's some sort of dua, like custom version.
Well, it is pretty much, yeah. But the skeptic's prayer basically goes like this. It's, oh God, if there is a God, save my soul if I have a soul. And most atheists, if they turn to God, they pray some version of that prayer, and that's what I prayed. I prayed, oh God, I don't know if you're there, but if you are, I need help. And I asked God, I said, if you're there, I need help. If you cure my daughter and then guide me to the religion that is most pleasing to you, I will follow. So that was the deal, And I left the prayer room and I went back to the intensive care unit, the neonatal intensive care unit. And the moment I entered the room, I knew something had changed. All the doctors were off on one end of the room, and they were all kind of huddled around my daughter with this cardiothoracic surgeon. I could see the looks on their faces that something had changed. And when when you enter the neonatal intensive care unit, you have to go through a process. You can't just walk in. You have to glove and gown and hat and all this stuff, And so when I got over to them, the cardiothoracic surgeon just looked at me and said, she's going to be okay. And here's where things get a little, I don't know, tricky, because he launched into a medical explanation of, it's called a patent ductus arteriosus for any medical personnel out there. And the thing about it is that once he started explaining it, I started realizing, this is a valid explanation. I remember this from my training. I'm an ophthalmologist, okay? So, I didn't hold on to much of my cardiothoracic training, but it's like, okay, I remember it from my training. It's a valid explanation, but you guys weren't with me just a few minutes ago when I did this prayer in the other room. And so that explanation might work for you, but I felt that I saw the hand of God in the saving of my daughter. And sure enough, she went on to become a perfectly normal child. She did not need any surgery. She did not need any medicine. I don't think they even gave her, maybe just a little bit of oxygen. That's it. And she just became a totally normal child. And she's now, she's now grown up. She's married and on her own and in her own life. But at the time, I realized that, I had made a promise, and I had to make good on my side of that promise. And you know how this goes. I mean, the story in the Quran of the people on the ship who pledged true faith, but then once they get to shore, they go back on their faith, right? Well, Jan, you haven't been a Muslim, that long, but congratulations on entering Islam. But I'll tell you something. A friend of mine was telling me about a guy he knew who worked in the merchant marine. He worked on ships. And this guy was a brother, and the other workers on the ship always made fun of him because he was always keeping to the 5 prayers. He was always eating halal, always respecting his religion and fulfilling the pillars. And the guys always just kind of mercilessly made fun of him until one day when they got into a superstorm. And it was one of these giant cargo ships. and they just got into a superstorm, and everybody thought that the ship was going down. And he related how every single person on the ship, I think there were like 32 crew on the ship. You know, it's not a passenger ship, it's a merchant marine. Every single one of the crew, including the captain, came to him and took Shahada. Right? They all thought this was the end. And they came out of it. And he said, every single one of them, when they got back to land, apostated. Went back to what they were before. So, you know, sometimes you see the teachings of the Quran come true in front of your eyes. But so in any case, I realized I had made a promise, and that set me on my spiritual search.
Mm-hmm.
And to make a long story short, I started reading the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament, started studying. And while I was doing this, I attended a lot of different congregations, talking with Jews and so on, and then on up to Christians, and going to a variety of different, Mormon and Quaker and Catholic and Orthodox, and a variety of Protestant denominations. And it was just always the same. I would always find some things that I said, okay, this is good, and I like this, and this part is true, but then I would have my questions that they couldn't answer. And I realized, it left me very frustrated, because I knew I had made a promise to Allah. I knew I wasn't fulfilling it, because, I couldn't find the religion of truth. And I was finding all of these inconsistencies and ungodly mistakes in the Bible. And then when I learned about Islam, I was very resistant, because I had all of these bad impressions in my head about Islam. But when I started reading the Quran, when I started reading the Sirah of the Prophet, the history of the Prophet, peace be upon him, everything suddenly made sense. And everything, every little objection I had, every prediction of a final prophet in the Bible, in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, et cetera, it all tied together and made sense. And that's when I became Muslim.
Yeah. It's I think the analogy with a ship can be now made with a plane, because I remember I was flying to Washington, D.C. once, and we got struck by lightning. The plane actually went dark, the electricity went out, and I was actually sitting, I think behind me were some Muslims, so they all started to pray, and everybody was praying on the plane, because it was like going through major turbulence. There was a tornado, I think, and they were closing down the airport. So I think that kind of applies also there. Why do you think like people then like they get so close to, like, let's say being submitted or whatever we want to call this thing, and then they kind of like forget about it, or they turn back, because what do you think is that?
Well, I think it's weakness of faith. I think it's desires. They desire this, this worldly life more than a religious life. But I think the main thing is that our religion teaches us that if Allah wants something good for a person, he gives them Islam. And our religion also teaches us that hidayah, guidance, is from Allah. And the point is that Allah gives guidance to whom he wills, and whom he guides, none can misguide, and whom he misguides, none can guide. And I think that's just purely the point, is that there are a lot of people who in a period of panic or desperation will profess belief, but then when they are returned to a condition of self-sufficiency, then they go back to disavowing God and just living their life as they wish. And actually, there's an ayat in the Quran in this regard that speaks about how when people see themselves as self-sufficient, they basically disavow their Lord. That's fascinating about the airplane. One thing that struck very close to home for me was that after I became Muslim, just a couple of years later, I had an incident in which I ran into a woman who had the same situation as mine. It was actually, I hate to monopolize on the time, but I love telling this story. I was in the Air Force, and the Air Force is a sort of a closed community, and they have a chaplain's office, and the chaplain's office sort of, they connect people to the members of their faith. So they might have a Catholic priest and maybe a rabbi, but they won't have, they will not have a representative of every religion, for example. But they will have what are called lay leaders. So, these are people who, if somebody comes to the chaplain's office and says, I need to speak to a Hindu, they'll say, okay, we have this person's name, call him. I need to speak to a Buddhist, okay, call this guy. Well, in any case, I was the Islamic lay leader. And one day I was in my office and I got this call from this woman who was panicking. I could tell she was panicking, the way she was talking and so on. And she was saying, Dr. Brown, I need to become Muslim. It's the only religion that's ever made sense to me. I believe in Islam. I need to become Muslim. But I could also tell she was a little drunk. Her words were slurred and so on. So I told her, I said, look, why don't you come in tomorrow, in other words, when she's sober, and we'll talk about it. I'll tell you what you're getting into and you'll see it. We'll see if you still want to become Muslim. Well, she didn't come. And about 3 or 4 days later, this couple, this man and this woman, came in with this child. And I knew this child. I had been consulted to check this child because, when a child is born premature, they can develop a condition in their eyes. So I was supposed to check this child's eyes while they were still in the hospital, but they had gotten discharged before I got over there. So in any case, they're coming in for the eye check. I checked the child's eyes. As I was checking the child's eyes, the couple are talking with me and amongst themselves, and I'm thinking, I've heard this woman's voice before somewhere. Where have I heard her voice? And then I realized, ding, the light bulb going on. Oh, this is the woman who called me a few days ago saying she wanted to become Muslim. And so I finished the exam, told them that the eyes were okay, and said to her, aren't you the lady who called saying that you wanted to become, and she cut me off. She wouldn't let me say the rest of the sentence. Now she's with her husband, right? So maybe she doesn't want to, say anything in front of him. But in any case, she said, she cut me off and she said, yeah. She said, but as you can see, and she pointed to her son. Now, her son was by no means out of the woods. He was still very sick. He was pale from lack of oxygen. He had portable oxygen by nasal cannula. He had a feeding tube in. He had a Heplock for IV medication. He was lethargic. He was not active, in the ways that even a newborn baby should be, just little things, and in any case, so he was still very sick, but he was well enough that he had gotten discharged from the hospital. And she pointed at him and she said, but you see, my son is better now, so I don't need God anymore. Mm-hmm. That's actually what she said. And as one of my friends said, lady, you need God to draw your next breath. But, the thing is, I was a fairly new Muslim. I had been Muslim only about 2 years. And I was pretty cocky about Islam, and I was pretty outspoken. And reformed smoker syndrome, like talking to everybody and saying, can't you see what I see? Why can't you see what I see? What's wrong with you? Here, get out your Bible. Let me show you. Don't you see this? Don't you see that? And it was at that moment when I realized, subhanAllah, Allah could have made me the one who went back and her the one who became true in faith. It's all by Allah's decree. And I found out, I figured things out later. I figured out that she had gone through the same process, praying to God, promising if he would heal her son and all of this. And then when it happened, she went back.
Yeah.
So I don't, I think it's just blessings from Allah upon the believers, and sadness upon those who go back to disbelief.
Right. No, I remember, I think last year in like March, I already knew Islam is the truth. I had no doubt, but I still wasn't willing to become a Muslim for another 10 months. And I was still doing like things I knew are against it, because I don't know what people like, when they realize it's probably true, but they still don't want to submit. I don't know what's that, like what sort of psychological state is that, because they live in sort of like a cognitive dissonance where they believe something, but they act differently. And that's very difficult to live like that. So for me, it was just one night when I was kind of like drunk, when I was like, okay, this is enough. I had this life, and like, I just need to stop, because I don't think I'm going to get another chance to come back to Islam. And yeah, it's just right now, I haven't been a Muslim for a long time, but I've developed certain perspective, and it's through the practice and experiences I had. I've traveled in Turkey and different countries. I also, try to pray and do everything as I can, eat halal. I'm the only Muslim far away in my country, Slovakia. There's no Islam, there's no mosque, there's nothing. And just through that, for like 11 months, I've developed a perspective, and to just share it with someone, it's very difficult because they haven't gone through that. So of course they can see what I see now. And they, it's not enough to just point out problems with the Bible or something, so yeah, I feel like I'm in that stage where you were, maybe, as you said, because I just see everything like, guys, this is so clear. Why don't we just all become Muslim? Or, just like different arguments, different contingency arguments. I'm trying to throw everything, but, it's just like, it's not logical. These things are not logical sometimes, but, there's more to it. And it's definitely difficult, but yeah, it's good, so.
I mean, yeah, be easy with the people around you, because, if Allah gives them, clarity of sight, opens their hearts and opens their minds, it will be easy. But if not, it will be hard. Yeah. And it's not always a case that this person will be a disbeliever. It just might be that it's not the time for them, maybe exactly. In a year or 2 years or 5 or 10, No,
I agree, because like my wife is a Christian, right? And we did the nikah when I became a Muslim. Like, we've been in an 8-year relationship, so I can't just throw her back. Like, we have everything together, right? So I told her, I'm becoming Muslim.
Why would you want to? She's Christian, she's halal for you.
Yeah, and I said, like, okay, so the kids have to be Muslim and everything, right? And so, but she's fine with it, and she has a certain level of knowledge now, because she goes with me to these countries, or she listens to lectures from like a sheikh we have. And I heard her, because I'm staying with her parents who are like ultra Orthodox Christians. I've heard her arguing with her father, because he was like, there are 77 virgins, and she was like, this is nonsense, or like they are, arguing about like basic beliefs. And I'm like, yeah, she gets it now. Like, she sees like wisdom. She's just not there yet. Like, I can't, force her to do anything, but she sees the wisdom behind it. So, it's just everyone has a time. And I think it's connected to a difficulty. Like, for me, there was a different difficulty of depression and sort of almost suicide and some crazy stuff. For you, it was what you just said with your daughter. So do you think people have to go through some sort of low moment in their life to realize, like, okay, there's something I'm missing here? Or do you think people can be like guided to any sort of religion without actually going through these hardships? They can just kind of have like, I don't know, a dream about Jesus or whatever. So like, what do you think people need? Because I think I've heard many stories and they often relate to these difficult times, you know.
Well, that's really interesting what you're bringing up. Yeah, because you and I basically met through my discussion with Bart de Ehrman, right?
Right.
You got my email from the talk that I gave, clarifying my discussion with Bart Ehrman, and what Bart de Ehrman and I were talking about. It was supposed to be a dialogue, but it became a debate. What we were talking about is the existence of God, but then secondly, how do you make sense of pain and suffering in the world in the context of a God? And this is one of the points that I made, is that it's the hardships in life that distinguish us, that makes us better people. We all feel this on a basic level. When you accomplish something easily, you do not feel a strong sense of accomplishment. Anybody could have done it, right? Because it was easy. But if you accomplish something that you have to struggle to accomplish that thing, you feel a sense of accomplishment and you feel better about yourself. You say, wow, I was able to do that. That wasn't easy. And not everybody would have done that. Not everybody would have stuck with it and done it. But, I was able to pull through and get it done. And you feel better about yourself, right? So, I mean, to a certain extent, I think pain and suffering are necessary in this world. If this world is to be what we understand Allah's design to be, namely a testing ground for us. You understand what I mean?
Right.
I mean, if you understand that we're in this life to prove ourselves, as I was saying in that discussion, Allah tests us, and He tests us in our patience. He tests us in our qualities, right? So you look at all of the good things that He tells us to do: take care of the orphans, feed the starving, give money to the poor, raise up the downtrodden. How can you do that if there isn't suffering? How can you take care of an orphan if there are no orphans? How can you free a slave if there are no slaves? How can you, feed the starving if there are no starving, or give money to the poor if there are no poor? But then on a personal level, I think a lot of us, like you and me, when we were atheists, I think we're just kind of cruising through this life. Our lives are kind of on cruise control. It's like in that car, when you hit the cruise control, our lives are kind of on cruise control, and we're just sort of cruising through it until something kind of slaps us on the face and forces us to wake up and take things more seriously. Do you agree with that or no?
Yeah, I think especially for people nowadays, when they live in these like individualistic lives alone, just kind of like chasing pleasure or just having the most easiest life possible, because there's no kind of, in the West, let's say, there's no starvation, or we don't have these existential problems. So there's no war, there's not much going on. So you just kind of entertain yourself through Netflix or some artificial means to build yourself some fake reality. But yeah, at some point, somebody's going to die in your family, or like something's going to happen. Like you're not going to do this forever. So, and that's gonna hit them. And I'm so lucky because a month ago, my grandma was dying. She was in a hospital from she had a heart attack. She had something in her brain, and she got a COVID at the same time. And wow. As a Muslim, I just went into my prayer. I was praying for like hours to, she's a Christian, but I was praying that, she would be judged accordingly and like everything. And she was like, it's impossible for her that she's alive, but she is alive, and after 1 month, she's now more better than before. She's now walking, she's taking, like, it's incredible. She's just younger, 10 years younger than she was. And I'm like, subhanallah, because I even made like on YouTube a comment for people who subscribe, like, make some dua. And I'm just like, this is a miracle. There's no way like this. She's 80. She's like very old, very sick. And it was just like, as a Muslim, I can deal with that. I have some sort of method or whatever, you know. But as a atheist, I don't know what I would do, you know, in those kind of moments. So yeah.
Can I ask you about, I mean, do you mind talking about yourself and your family, or are you shy on that subject?
You can ask me anything, but you know, I just don't want to talk
What?
about me that much, you know, because you know, I'm not the interesting person here, let's say.
Well, no, I think you probably are actually. You know, what I want to ask you is, so you've been with your wife for 8 years.
Yeah.
So I presume you love her, and I presume she loves you.
Hopefully, yeah. Inshallah. Yes.
And you know, you feel that she's a good person, and obviously, how many children do you have?
We don't have any kids right now. We don't have any kids, but we plan on, you know, doing some family next year, inshallah. But you know, I don't know right now.
Have you ever explained to her what Muslims believe, just the pillars of belief, not the pillars of practice, the pillars of belief?
Yes, she knows it. She knows it, everything. She knows pretty much. She even knows how long it's going to be Judgment Day. What's the first 25,000 years going to look like? Then what's going to happen? She knows like every bit. And I think she knows more stuff than a Muslim, like at this point. Yeah, she's very open.
Well, then just be patient with her and show her the noble manners of the Muslim, and show her that Islam has made you a better person. Not, you know, and you know, inshallah, Allah will bring what is best.
Yeah, it's pretty clear, like just staying out of drinking and all these things, like she can see how much like you would want a man who doesn't do those things, who doesn't engage in those things, because like there's been a lot of bad men in our families and they all have gambling problems or all these things that Islam prohibits, right? So if you just stop doing the haram, it's gonna make you inevitably a better person without even doing much of the good deeds. If you add the good deeds, then it's even better. So yeah, I agree with that.
There's a particular way that I introduce Islam to people who are, you know, seem to be on their way. And you know, and if you'd like, I can explain it to your wife at any time. I know that's not why we're on this, you know, blog together, but if you wanted to bring her on, I could give her a very quick little intro, and it might help. And it might be good for your viewers to hear this as well. It's up to you. I don't want to put you on the spot, but you know.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if it's gonna happen today. Probably not, but maybe in the future, inshallah, because you know, she's taking care of the niece in the other room, and there's her parents and stuff. So, but yeah, it's a good idea.
You can sound her out, and basically just the way it goes is, this is something I was told when I was investigating Islam. I met one brother who had a very good way of introducing it. And what he told me was, he said, look around you. And if you look around you, you will see that every single thing that we as human beings have made with our own hands, we've made for a purpose. So that microphone in front of you, the earbuds, the shirt on your back, the paint on the walls, the table in front of you, et cetera, et cetera. Every single thing, big and small, that we have made, we've made for a purpose. And that purpose is to serve us. We don't make anything except that we make it for a reason, and that is to perform a function for us, to serve us. And every single one of those things that we make have rules. So even if it's something as simple as a spoon, you know, you use it right side up, not upside down. You put it in your mouth, not in your eye. Now, those things are obvious to us as adults, but that's not obvious to a baby, right? For a baby, he puts everything in his mouth. Even if you hand him a steak knife, he'll put it in his mouth. That's not the right use for it, right? So everything has rules. So doesn't it make sense that in the same way that everything we made for the purpose of serving us, doesn't it make sense that Allah made us to serve him? In the same way that everything has rules, there are rules upon us. And those rules are conveyed in Revelation. If you buy the computer that you're looking at me through, a television set, any piece of electronics that's just a little bit complicated, a car or whatever, what does it come with? It comes with an owner's manual. And that owner's manual is written by who? It's written by the one who made the product. Sony doesn't write the owner's manual for Panasonic. Ford doesn't write the owner's manual for Chevy, right? So you'd expect, of course, the book of rules upon us will be written by the one who made us, and that's Revelation. Open up any owner's manual for any product. What does it say? First thing, it warns you what happens if you use this wrong. Things can go bad. There can be bad consequences. It tells you how to use it correctly. And then at the end, there's a troubleshooting guide. If things aren't working, how to correct it, right? This is like revelation for mankind. It's the owner's manual describing to us the rules upon us, how we can go wrong, how we can go right, how we can get back on track if we get off track, and how it will benefit us if we do it correctly. So this is kind of a short way of saying something that people don't often present. We always talk about, okay, the pillars of faith are Allah, the angels, the books, the messengers, heaven and hell, and divine decree, okay? And the pillars of practice are prayer and zakat, etc. You know all this, right? But sometimes a person needs the word that speaks to their heart. And the most important thing that, in my experience, that people really need to hear is purpose of life. Why are we here? In the same way that we made all of these things to serve us, Allah made us to serve him. That is our purpose of life.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I might reuse some of it as well, but I can already imagine some people saying like, hey, well, why do we need a guide? We're smart creatures. And that's kind of the arrogance seeping in and just kind of taking you away, at that point. Because
it's a very good question. And the answer again is what I said. Sony doesn't write the book for Panasonic. I mean, if you go and buy a car, if it's a Volvo, the book is not written by Mercedes-Benz. And in the same way, we as human beings have been trying to write that book for as long as we've been able to write, and we've never gotten it right. Yeah. It doesn't matter what country you look at, it doesn't matter what culture, and it doesn't matter what period of time. Nobody has ever produced a set of civil and civic laws in their country that works. They're all fallible.
Yeah.
Nobody has ever written a set of laws that everybody says, oh yeah, that's it, that's perfect. Yeah, we agree upon that.
Actually, there was a philosopher. He was a political scientist called Fukuyama, and towards the end of 20th century, when the Soviet Union fell, he thought like liberal democracy is the end of human progression, and it will spread, and everybody will just accept it, and that's the end of history. It was called the end of history. He's like, because I studied political science and relations, and basically, people in the 90s, they might have thought this because there was just the Soviet Union kind of falling apart, but essentially none of that happened. Like people rejected liberalism, and now they are even more conservatives are on the rise, whether Christian or Muslim or whatever. It's not going the way they thought. So of course, each system has problems. I agree with that. And I think a helpful thing also for Muslims to remember is, if you're arguing with someone, try to think about it from the opposite view. So my whole point was always, even if you argue with, like, I was a very hardcore, like, libertarian capitalist, but I would always try to present the communist view as best as I could, just to, like, make myself work even better on my view, because I have to be able to think on the other, like, how the other person thinks. And the same thing has to be true for Muslims. Like, you have to be able to think like an atheist, even if you haven't been one, and you should be able to think like a Christian as well. And it's kind of like very healthy to get into these things. It's very, I mean, it's not for everyone. I guess this might be like difficult, but I think if people did this, there would be less of these kind of debates as you had with Bart Ehrman, because, like, obviously he hadn't thought through the Muslim perspective that much, and it was clear about that. And I think, yeah, it's just and people who can't even get themselves to even argue for the opposite side, well, that's the problem. Like, at least try it out, even if you don't believe it, they have some point to make. So I don't know, it's just my idea.
No, it's very, it's a very good idea. I mean, the more you practice that way, that approach, the more you practice that approach, the better you will be at answering questions, because you will foresee the questions, and prepare the answers before they even come up. And I think it's a very important way of thinking. I mean, I remember in my medical training that we were trained that, when you're discussing with the patient, you have to see things not from your point of view, but from their point of view. Mm-hmm. And it's especially true in like business negotiations, isn't it? Yeah. If you cannot understand what the other person wants and needs, then you are not going to be able to effectively negotiate with them. So yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah, that's why customer experience or customer feedback is so valuable for companies, because they get the real essence of what people are thinking when buying a product, and it's valuable. It's like so much valuable when you can get that. So I mean, I have 2 companies, and it's all about like being customer focused at the end of the day, what they want. So and one thing maybe is like, so when you were doing were going through the spiritual journey, some people, and this was me also, we get stuck in this point of, okay, there is a God. I believe there's some sort of primal or whatever. Now, why should I follow organized religion? And I was in this phase maybe for like 10 months, because I just couldn't move from that position. I knew, like, there's a creator, and what I did, I invented my own religion. So I started praying in my own way. I started doing things in my own way, just to kind of fit my narrative, because I was sure it's not Christianity. I was raised as a Christian, and I knew, like, Christmas is not Christian at all. It's coming from Nordic religions. Like, why is this even here? Like, all these problems within the faith I could see. So I was sure, like, there's no other religion I can follow. And it was just kind of like, okay, I'm going to make my own. But how do you go about this? Because I know many people, most of the people, even if they say, I believe in the higher power, or I believe in God, they don't go anywhere from there. That's kind of the end for them.
I've got a great story for you. I mean, first of all, this way of thinking falls in the category of, a lot of people just say, isn't it enough just to be good? I mean, isn't it enough just to be good? I'm a good person. Isn't that enough? Okay. And then, like you say, they basically design their own religion. Not in the sense that they formally sit down and write out a list of, things, but just in the sense that they decide to live life their way. So the story is this. I was having this discussion with my father. Now, my father was atheist all of his life. Excuse me, that's not quite true. My father was raised Quaker, which is a Protestant, sect of Christianity. But he was a scientist, and like many intellectuals, he gravitated towards atheism. So at the same time that he admired a lot of Quaker morals and so on, he did not believe in a God. So that made him atheist. So in any case, I was having this discussion with my father, and I always get this question, what happened to your father in the end? And so just for everybody out there, I was Muslim for maybe about, I'm guessing now, but it was probably about 10 or 12 years before he eventually did make Shahada. And so we, we trust that Allah accepts that Shahada, alhamdulillah. But way before that happened, okay, we were having this exact discussion. And I said to him, I said, Dad, think of it this way. Imagine that one day you went to work, and while you were away at work, I just decided I'm going to run things my way. So when you came home after work, I met you at the door and said, Dad, you can come into the house. But while you were away, I've decided we're going to run things inside this house my way. I'm a good person. Okay, I'm a good person. It's enough just to be good, but we're going to do things by my rules from now on. I said, so you can come into the house, but only if you're going to do things by my rules. I said, what would you say to me? And he said, son, I'd tell you to go to hell. And I said, Dad, exactly. And that's kind of the point. Because how arrogant is it for us to recognize a creator, recognize that he's the creator and we are his creation, and we are living in his house, his creation, and yet we're telling him we're going to make the rules? It's like my father said, you go to hell. Mm-hmm. And it was just, it's such a funny story with my father, because it was so heartfelt and so sincere, so so just spontaneous. He wasn't planning ahead or measuring his words. He was saying exactly what he was feeling at the moment. And yeah, so there's your answer. I mean, we don't get to choose. It's, again, back to the analogy that I was telling you. If you look around, everything that we've made to serve us. And we know how we want that thing to serve us, right? That thing does not make its own rules.
Yeah.
When I was having my talk with Bart D. Ehrman, I kind of was talking in this way, because I pointed out to him in in the main talk, yeah, I pointed out to him that he's an educator, right? He's a professor. He doesn't let the students come into his classroom and write the tests, design the tests, design the quizzes, say what they're going to do for homework. They might be very intelligent. They might be very good people. He doesn't let them take over the classroom. When you go to the job, okay, so you have your companies, but I mean, other people where they have bosses, the boss doesn't allow them to determine their working hours, to decide what their job profile is, what their job description is, what their promotion scale is, and so on. No, these are things only the boss constructs and dictates upon them. You and I, we're citizens of countries. They don't let us write international law, right? It'd be nice if they did. It'd be great if they did, but they don't let us write the international law. And if we did, I mean, it's, imagine we'd be in jail like that. I mean, who are you to be, to be changing the laws? And yet we think that we can, basically overrule revelation. By the way, just for your own interest, during the time of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is exactly what people of his time did with him. There were people during the time of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who asked him, take this back and bring us something more to our liking, basically.
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
So we don't get to make that choice.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, at some point, if you're gonna look for the religion of the truth, you should remove all your biases, and you might think you don't have them, but there are some. And when I was looking at Islam, anytime I came across something that was kind of like against what I believed, I highlighted it, and then I made more research on it, because I'm just not gonna like stop my research because I found something unpleasant for me at this time with this value system that I have. I don't even know where from, because I don't even believe in these values technically. I just adopted them. But when I actually thought about, like, do I really believe gay people should be married? Let's say that's an example, right? I don't know. I had no view as an atheist. I just take anything that society says and I just say, okay, because you don't have any sort of like base. It doesn't like go against you as an individual, so you don't see any problem with that. And so most of the values people actually have are not their own. They have been imposed on them, like through family or whatever. So you have to look at it like, okay, I have some values, but I don't actually believe these things. I need to find what I believe.
Yeah.
That's based on the truth, not based on whatever society or something like that. So
and that's exactly what our religion teaches us, is that every child is born on their fitra, but it's their parents that make them a Christian or a Jew or whatever, or a Zoroastrian or whatever.
And then it's the
like
society that makes us atheists, I think.
Yeah. And of course, this is what Islam means, right? Submission to the will of Allah, submitting to Allah's will, not submitting to our will. And this is the mistake that people of the past always made. They added what they wanted, they took away what they did not like. They basically crafted the revelation to be closer to their heart's desires.
Yeah.
And so every time the revelation became corrupted, it was necessary for Allah to send another prophet, another clarifying revelation, until the last prophet and the last revelation. This is one of the things, that always bothered me when I was on my spiritual search, just kind of trying to figure out, well, why this sequence of prophets and so on? Why not just send one prophet?
Yeah.
And it's only when I realized that if you look at the chain of revelation, not only did it make sense, the Old Testament predicting 3 prophets to follow, the New Testament predicting 1 prophet to follow, John the Baptist and Jesus Christ being the first 2, and then leaving room for the third. But it made sense because, if you look at the Psalms of David, you cannot construct a law that mankind can live by. It's so corrupted. You cannot use that revelation as a comprehensive book of guidance. And so at every step, Old Testament, why did Jesus say that he was sent? He was not sent but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, meaning again that they were lost, their revelation had become corrupted. So every time it became corrupted, it required another prophet, another book of Revelation, until the final prophet, the final book of Revelation. And like I said, that was just one more loose end that Islam made sense of for me.
Mm-hmm. I think this is a good question. Sometimes people try to find wisdom in something, let's say, like, I don't know, what you just mentioned, or why do we, for example, why don't we eat pig, or why do we pray 5 times a day and not like 7? And all these things are sort of like, you can ask, for example, why is there a green light when you go on the street, you wait with a car? Why is there a green light? Why is it not blue? Why is it green? Like, is there a reason for that? Well, you will never know. Like, it doesn't have to be green, by the way. It can be like not yellow. It can be like purple, but it's green because it's green. Like those things, like praying 5 times a day and not 7, or doing around the Kaaba circles, right? 7 circles. Like, there's no like specific reason for it that, you know, you will get enlightened by. But there are things like, why is there apostasy law, or why is this? Like, there are things you can find wisdom in, and there are things which are like, well, it's just kind of what it is. Like, you can question everything like this basically forever. You can even question like, well, why didn't Allah bring out the Quran online and just live stream it on YouTube? Like, what, isn't that the better way to do it? You know, like, why? You know, that, so you can, if you have this mindset, you can forever question any rule in any religion, in any way of life, and you will never get anywhere, you know.
Well, you'll just get into that infinite regress that, you know, it never leads to a satisfying answer. But did you see in one of the two talks I gave regarding the talks with Barty Ehrman, one of the things that I mentioned was that Dr. Ehrman's main objection was, why is there pain and suffering in this world?
I think, yeah, it's the evil, right? The argument of evil or something.
Yeah, but the point I made was that this is a question that human beings have been asking as far back as written history. We don't know how far back it goes, but we do know that this question was actually asked before human beings were even created. Because in the Quran, you know, Allah announces that he's going to create mankind, he's going to create humankind. And what did the angels say? The angels asked, are you going to create one who causes corruption and bloodshed? Mm-hmm. And do you know Allah's answer to that?
You know what I know what you don't know, right?
Exactly. I know what you do not know. And I thought that was fascinating, because Allah does not launch into a big logical explanation. It doesn't say, you know, oh, okay, why? Well, because 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, no. Allah just says, I know what you do not know, which is, I mean, if you said that to somebody, right? You know, if you told a person, you know, duck, because you see something flying at their head. They said, why? It said, trust me, duck, right? Have a little faith, duck. I'm trying to help you, you know. And so in another context, in another context, you know, you would be basically, you know, it's basically like saying, trust me, have faith. I mean, I know what you don't know. Trust. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was, or at least just submit, you know, because I thought it was just such a beautiful thing, because, as I said, it's such a perfect place for Allah to answer that question, which Allah knew would be an eternal question, right? Or at least a question as long as mankind is alive, you know. And so it would have been such a perfect place for Allah to have answered that question, had he wanted to give a different answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I just think when it comes to the point of evil, especially, and it's just coming from my own experience when I had like a nightmare, and I thought I'm never gonna wake up, and then I woke up and I forgot about it like in 10 minutes, and it was the worst fear I ever had in my life, and it was gone like that. So, you know, it's just like, for us this life maybe seems like long, but the more you study the Day of Judgment, or when, you know, what happens in the grave and stuff like that, the more you realize like this period is like very short, and there will be such a long time that's coming after this, that just imagining, you know, standing there looking around, people are running away, like just being that, have a sheikh explain it to you, and just imagine that, and you will, you know, this will happen, by the way. And so just prepare for that. And everything, like even before this life, you were somewhere, your soul was in Jannah, right, already, and you did the shahada to Allah. So, but you don't remember it. So, you know, you will of course also lose memory of some things, and all your ties, all your relationships, all that, it's gone. Like, so to there's evil in this world, but if there's this another realm of existence, then which is eternal, by the way, it's, you can't really have this mindset of because there's evil here, therefore God doesn't exist. I think it's more like a subjective view that somebody can have, which is fine. I mean, some people can't get over that, but I don't think it actually is any sort of objection. Even if there are dying babies or anything like, there's still a way to think about this if you don't have a materialist worldview. Of course, if you just believe this world is everything there exists, then you have a problem.
Exactly. But even as Muslims, we may not be able to search out an explanation, but we know that we're not better than angels. And Allah told the angels, I know what you do not know. And Allah has told us that of knowledge we have little. So we have to embrace the reality that there are things for which we cannot find an explanation. And that's where submission comes in.
Right.
Trust in Allah, faith in Allah, and submission to Allah.
Yeah.
So yeah, 100%.
I agree with that. Well, I don't want to take more of your time because I know it's been like 1 hour, but I'd be happy to catch up also in the future and chat about some other issues. But thank you so much for stopping by, Jazakallah khair. And I always, I would wish that I would go to Medina someday. So hopefully, inshallah, in the future, I'll
definitely contact me if you're on the way. Make sure you contact me. If you don't mind, please just mention my email for anybody out there who wants it. It's askdrbrown@yahoo.com, and that's doctor is just DR, so it's just askdrbrown@yahoo.com.
Definitely. Well, I'll leave it in the description as well, maybe. So thank you so much, Dr. Brown, and hopefully we'll catch up another time.
Okay, very good.